C squared is going to tell us all about, again, our slavery. Who here thinks that they're free? I'm the only idiot in the room. Everyone else knows that there's sort of like, let's call it an imposition of behavioral choices that we are forced to be subjected to. So if you ever had a conversation with your family that didn't go well when you tried to explain this to them, this is the guy you need to listen to, because he'll be able to break it down by the ones and zeros to where there's no denying it and there's no escaping the reality that we're ruled by psychopaths, and we need to do something about that. So without further ado, I introduce Etienne de Boetie2 to get yourselves learned.
Thank you. So, as Carmen said, my nom de plume is Etienne de la Boetie, and I'm the founder of the Art of Liberty Foundation, and we're a startup public policy organization that promotes voluntary free market solutions over monopoly government. I'm also the author of a book called Understanding Our Slavery that exposes how intergenerational organized crime controls the government and the media. And the book uses visualizations, media ownership charts, infographics, and historical photos to expose the hidden connections between the shady banks, Beltway bandits, monopoly media companies, and 24 new media companies dominating search, social media, retail, meetups, and comment posting, among others, among other control of perception tactics on the DARPA internet. But tonight, I'm here to tell you a story about how, as far as I know, I was stumbled into the closest thing to a takeover of the White House, and stumbled across the Secret Service's biggest secret. And so, a quick background on me: I'm a tech and media entrepreneur. I'm a consultant, board director, operating executive. In my youth, I worked at one of the big four think tanks. I ran a national third-party political campaign. And I live outside of Washington, D.C. until very recently in Ashburn, Virginia. And so I've got a chance to see politics kind of up close and personal. And whenever protests come to protest our organized crime government, I always like to show up and try and cause as much trouble as I can. And today I want to tell you the story of when the veterans marched on Washington, D.C. in 2013 after the Obama administration locked them out of their own memorials, an event called the Million Veterans March on the Memorials. And the Uniformed Secret Service, the Park Police, and Washington, D.C. Metro Police had never really encountered such open hostility before, and never before has the organized crime government ever demonstrated their callous disdain for the military. And so before we get into how the veterans shut down Washington, D.C., and the media didn't tell you about it, and the big secret about the Secret Service, we have to kind of set the stage so everybody understands what was going on in October of 2013. And so let me take you back. And so back in October of 2013, the Obama-Clinton administration had been exposed as kind of liars and criminals. They were 6 months into their second term, and they hadn't ended any of the wars they promised to end. They had openly given the banks $20 trillion through the TARP and the TALF and the bailouts, even though 90% of the country was against it. They had just lost $500 million from a failed green energy company tied to the Clinton Obamas called Solyndra, and the organized crime government was forcing everyone into a healthcare scheme where they could not even produce a website for $500 million from a company run by one of Michelle Obama's Princeton classmates. So the government was kind of I don't want to say they were kind of feeling it right now, and the tide had changed, and we had come up to the national debt ceiling in October of 2017. And back to 2013, and back then it stood at $17 trillion, and the Republicans were pretending to be fiscally conservative, while the Democrats were pretending the lights are going out in Washington, D.C. And the quote-unquote debt ceiling, for anybody that's been paying attention, is much like the Social Security lockbox or the Bill of Rights. They're just kind of rules that apply to you, but don't apply to everything else, and it can be discarded at any time. And the debt ceiling had been ignored dozens and dozens of times since 1917, and so nobody was really paying any attention to Washington, D.C. And so nobody was paying any attention to Washington, D.C., and so Washington, D.C. decided to make it hurt. And so we're going to inconvenience the population in ways that get them mad and get them to clamor to turn the government back on. And so some of the things they did were just ridiculous. They turned off the panda cam at the National Zoo as if the money for the panda cam was going to be, too much money for, them to be able to cover in the shortfall. But the main thing they did is they spent money that they didn't have to inconvenience the veterans. And so if anybody that's been to Washington, D.C. knows the World War II memorials, the war memorials, they're essentially kind of like open air. There's nobody really has to be there. But because they wanted to have everybody agitating, they spent money to erect barricades, these heavy steel frame barricades around the monuments. They locked the monuments out. The veterans said, we're not going to have any of this. I think they tagged it onto like an already scheduled protest for something else, but they very, very quickly came to Washington, D.C. in force, along with a rally of truck drivers called the Ride to the Constitution. And since they were going to come and protest the organized crime government, I was going to be there too. And so I went down with my two kids and we took my 60-foot sign. And for any of you who've read my book, you've seen this, and the recipe for the book is in the book. But the sign is kind of a Banksy-esque attempt to summarize our quote-unquote political problems in the shortest number of words, and then take that phrase and make it as big as humanly possible in a way that is impossible for the media to ignore, except the media ignores it all the time. This is probably the most censored sign in protest history. And so even though this sign is the biggest sign that's ever been, any protest I've ever been, it's always the biggest sign. And even though it's been photographed thousands and thousands of times, it never appears in social media or on the news or anything like that. This is when we had the sign out at the Women's March on Washington, where we had set up on the dais between the Capitol and the Capitol reflecting pool before the march even got started, so that everybody streaming out of the Union Station Metro, which is the main metro stop in Washington, D.C., it's a river of people, just a river of people going right in front of us. 5 to 10 people at any time have stopped, got out of the line, they're taking pictures. I've had over a dozen members of the press come up to me, interview me, ask me what the sign's all about. I explain it to them. They take pictures of the sign, or they write down all my information. It's never appeared in print. And so we took it. So my boys at that time were 9 and 11 years old. And the first thing that we did is we stretched it out. So the protest is going on at the World War II Memorial, and we stretch it out on the fence around the Washington Memorial, okay, facing the World War II Memorial, so that everybody, it's absolutely impossible to ignore unless you crop it like that. That's a picture taken on the day. They got plenty of flaggetry, but somehow they missed the sign. And so what the right was shown about what happened that day was Sarah Palin and Ted Cruz had come, and I don't think they were actually invited. I think they just kind of like glommed on so that the media could pretend it was a right-wing Tea Party event. And then at the same time the right was shown this is what the left was shown in Salon and in Washington Post. So we're going to try and make the protesters look like racist rednecks. And I know that this guy is an agent provocateur, because after Park Police came and they took the sign down, and we went and we got to the tail end of the rally, everybody starts moving. And so now the veterans, so this is where it gets interesting. So now the veterans are going to go and they're going to march to the White House. Now this guy's two friends immediately start going, oh, hey, we're going to the White House. Everybody, we're going to the White House. We're going to the White House. And they begin trying to pull the crowd in the entire wrong direction. They literally tried to lead the crowd physically in the wrong direction, but it was the military. An officer steps up and he's like, no, we're going this way. And then everybody continues on the White House. Now, what you may or may not have seen is, so the protesters began tearing down the barricades with their bare hands. They lifted them above their heads, and they marched through Washington, D.C., carrying the barricades to the White House and began slamming the barricades in a pile in front of the White House. In addition to slamming the barricades, and so now they're just literally making a pile in front of the White House. The uniformed Secret Service begins kind of flipping out. At one point, well, first of all, let me back up. So we get to the White House, and my oldest son, who's 11, looks at me and he goes, Dad, I don't think that they know it's organized crime. And I go, oh, no, they know it's organized crime. He's like, Dad, no, I don't think that they know it's organized crime. And I'm like, no, they know it's organized crime. No, Dad, I don't think they know it's organized. I'm like, right, come with me. So I take him, we go over to the first guard post that we walk up to, and it was a uniformed Secret Service guard post on the perimeter of the White House. And I look at the guy and I go, excuse me. And so everybody assumes I'm in the military because I have short hair and good posture. And like that was working for me kind of like in this, scenario. And I said, excuse me, I'm, here, with the protests and everything. And I got my sons. It's an educational experience. And I was trying to explain to him that government is just kind of organized crime. It's just organized crime. And he doesn't think that you guys know that it's organized crime. And I was wondering if you would help elucidate my son. And the guy looks at me and he gets a big smile on his face. And he's like, well, I can't say anything, as he's like winking at my son. And I go, thank you, I appreciate it. And so I go, now are you, he's like, no, like, well, he was winking. I got that, like, okay, we'll go to the next one. So we go to the next guard post at the thing, and I start the same thing, and we just start going around, and we hit 2 or 3. And some people wouldn't talk to us at all. Some people would say, the best were the Washington police. Yeah, we know it's organized crime. What do you want us to do about it? And I'm like, thank you, officer. Like, I appreciate that you know it's organized crime. And so then after 3 or 4 either encounters with the Washington police that were there, the park police or whatever, I realized that they all know that it's organized crime. You can see it in their face. You can look right in their faces and they know it's organized crime. So I decide to kind of shift up my tactics. So now we go to the next guard post along the post, and I say, officer, I've been talking to all these guard posts and members of law enforcement, and all of you guys know that this is organized crime. By the way, there is now a full-fledged riot going on all around me. So now we were in the kind of the leading edge of the veterans. Now all the barricades have shown up. They're now slamming them down. They've surrounded the Secret Service, and some Secret Service agents, females, are crying, which has been censored out of the news, and I'll show you some examples of the censorship here in a second. At one point, they've got a group of Secret Service agents, the uniformed Secret Service, the kind of clean-cut kids that they clean up and present to the public as being the face of the government. They've got them surrounded at a fence, and they're yelling at them. They're calling them traitor. How can you work for Obama? He's a socialist. You guys are scum. And they're like literally going off on this. So now the whole scene has turned into the veterans are pissed, and now they're at the gates of the White House. So I now switch up my tactics, and I go to the next one, and I go, hey, all you guys know that this is organized crime. You guys are law enforcement. You guys have the guns. You guys could do something about it. Who here among you is a leader? And the guy's like looking, and he's really thinking about it. You can see it in his eyes. He's like, well, that's my boss over there, right over there. That's the incident commander. And so I go over to the incident commander. I go, understand that you're the incident commander. I've talked to all of these different guards around here. All of you guys know that this is organized crime. You've got the place surrounded. You've got the guns. Like, everybody knows it's organized crime. Why don't you guys do something about it? He's like, well, I go, who are the leaders among you? I kept asking, who are the leaders among you? He's like, well, that's my boss, over there. So I go over to him, and I just start rotating around. At one point, I stand up in front of the entire crowd, and I'm like, all of these guys know that this is organized crime. they just need to know that we know and that we support them. And like people are like, they don't know, they're idiots, they're dumb, they're too stupid to know that it's organized crime. I'm like, no, I've talked to them. They all know that it's organized crime. And so then they send in a uniformed park policeman who evidently they thought I was the leader. And they go, sir, we'd like to have a word with the leader of the protest, And I pick up my 9-year-old. I go, here's the leader. You want to, and my 9-year-old's like, Dad, no. And so that guy went away, and so the situation kind of began to deteriorate, and we would just keep walking around to these different guard posts. Some of them would not talk to us. Some of them were freaking out. I mean, they were legitimately scared of everything that was going on around them. We went up to what looked like a plane, an unmarked FBI, vehicle, and I thought they were going to pull their guns on us. They were literally freaking out at everything that was going around them. They brought in the mounted troops and had them, trying to corral the crowd, and then they began bringing in the Washington D.C. Police Department in riot gear to sweep the street. And so now you've got probably 36 riot police that I went up to and tried to explain that it was organized crime, but they were freaking out too. They were like, you better get, they were seriously, did not want to take on these veterans. And at the same time that they're doing that, they're also, oh, by the way, this is a disabled veteran carrying one of the barricades to the White House on a Segway, and you can tell he's a double amputee, and he was literally carrying it, on the way. So the other thing that they did is they tried to intimidate the crowd with snipers. So they take the sniper team that's usually on the top of the White House that stays invisible. It's called a counter sniper team, and they not only did they make them visible on the roof, but they had another counter sniper team that was suited up, evidently like it was shift change, whatever. It was at the kind of the back of the White House, and the veterans were literally flipping off the counter team, saying, "Fuck you! How can y'all work for Obama?" The veterans weren't having any. The veterans weren't intimidated. They weren't having any of it. Now, this is kind of interesting. So all of this has been censored off of CIA, Google, and yeah. So all this is, so if you Google snipers in White House and Million Vets March on Memorial on Google, somehow you don't get any pictures of that. But if you do the exact same search string on DuckDuckGo, you get plenty of pictures of the snipers on top of the White House. So this was what was going on. Now they're about to sweep the street. The police are freaking out, and then, damn it, here come the truckers. So there's a convoy of truckers, and just when I thought we were going to do it, this convoy of trucks come in, and it pulls like the main group to where the truckers have all pulled up, and the whole thing dissipates. And after it was over, it struck me that even though we didn't do it that time, we know the biggest secret of the Secret Service now. And the biggest secret of the Secret Service is that they know this is organized crime. And so I don't think that they know that you know that it's organized crime and that you're on their side and that you want them to do something about it. So now I'm going to switch up my tactics when I go to Washington, D.C. I'm going to go and visit the Secret Service and the Uniformed Secret Service, and I'm going to give them copies of my book, and I'm going to give them copies of my flash drive, and I'm going to encourage everybody once a month, let's say the anniversary month from today, to show up at the White House, and let's have a talk with the Secret Service, the Uniformed Secret Service, and tell them, hey, we understand, we know that it's organized crime. We want you to know that we have your back. We want you to know that we can arrest them together. We'll come together and arrest them, these criminals, and see what they say. Take a look at their eyes. Ask them if they know it's organized crime. See what they say back. And then, if enough people come, maybe we can all arrest them together. And if the Uniformed Secret Service doesn't do anything about it, maybe we can arrest them too. And that's the story of the Veterans March on Washington in 2013. and the biggest secret of the Secret Service. So I'll be down there on the 13th. I'll be down there on the 13th of next month, and I've got some books for the Secret Service agents, and we're going to expose it and show people what's up. And so I've got a little bit of time for questions if you want to see questions. Go. You can get books. I will be right over there right after the thing, and happy to sell anybody a book, Understanding Our Slavery. Yes.
How did you structure your book and why?
So the book is really an attempt to make what has been invisible visible. And so in my day job, I help Fortune 500 companies learn at the speed of light. Most people are visual learners. And so in the book, I use visualizations, I use media ownership charts, I use historical photos to expose the techniques that intergenerational organized crime has used in Nazi Germany, in Soviet Russia, in East Germany, and they're using the exact same techniques here in the United States. And when you see them next to each other, you can't unsee it. You very quickly realize, oh, this is a playbook. They're all using the same techniques. And I also use a lot of visualizations to make what was invisible visible. This is a media ownership chart that's in the book. I only have a fraction of it in the book. If I tell you that there are 6 media companies running hundreds and hundreds of subsidiaries to give you the illusion of diversity of opinion and diversity of information, you may or may not believe me, but if I show you a media ownership chart where you can see that News Corp right here at the top literally owns 175 newspapers, satellite things, television programming, television production, movie theaters, very quickly you realize, holy shit, there's 6 companies running hundreds of subsidiaries to control perception, and you kind of get it, and you come to a deeper understanding because you saw it with your own eyes, and you've made something that was invisible visible. This is another visualization from the book. So that first visualization shows you who owns the media, the physical means of production, the printing presses, the television stations, but how do you give hundreds and hundreds of journalists their marching orders across dozens and dozens and dozens of publications? Well, there are 3, this is another visualization, and this one shows 3 organizations, Bilderberg, Council on Foreign Relations, and Trilateral Commission, have maneuvered their membership into all of the key reporters and editorships. And that media control system is how you're able to cover up 9/11, you're able to sell the TARP, the TALF, the bailout, or the next BS war on manufactured intelligence, because you've got to get them together to get meetings. These are the front organizations that get them together to give meetings. And by the way, Council on Foreign Relations and Bilderberg, Jeffrey Epstein was a member of both the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberg Group. So not only do you have them controlling perception in the media, you have them controlling politicians in what was obviously a blackmail op. Obviously they are getting politicians, prominent individuals, they're getting them in compromising situations with underage girls and boys, they're photographing them and they're using it as blackmail. And again, you see the same organizations. So on the old media side, which is television, radio, and print, you've got 6 companies running kind of hundreds of subsidiaries. On the new media side, you've got maybe 24 companies that have been funded to consolidate their own industries and control perception on what I like to call the DARPA internet. And so I'm an ex-networking guy. I used to build networks for Wall Street, for market data, trading floor technology. I've seen pictures of the DARPA internet. In fact, before it was the DARPA internet, it was the ARPA internet. And if you search DuckDuckGo for ARPA network map 1973-1974, you will find that in 1973-1974, they had hundreds of institutions on the internet. They had the internet way before they gave it to us. They had hundreds in 1973-1974. I think they knew exactly the important companies, technologies, search, social media, what they needed to control perception. And so these companies have been financed to consolidate their own industries, have the best dominant platforms. Everything is free, except it's not free, because once you're on it, you're subject to their algorithmic manipulation. And so, and one of the things that I do in the book is I back everything up with an 8 gig flash drive that I call the Liberator. And half of the content is evidence of government and media corruption, where they've been caught lying and just making up news stories out of whole cloth, faking press conferences, making things disappear down the memory hole. And then half of it is the big secret that they don't want you to know, which is voluntarism, which is we don't need government. Everything that government does that's legitimate and non-redistributive could be done by the free market. It could be done by private companies, private charities. You wouldn't have the monopoly police. You would have ADT and West Tech competing for your business. And if West Tech was rude to you, then you could move over to ADT. If you wanted to, but that ADT guard, he would only be able to do what you have the ability to do, which is protect your life, liberty, and property. He doesn't have the ability to decide what habits you have or whether or not you arrest you for gambling or smoking a plant, because you don't have that right. So you can't delegate a right you don't have to your security guard. So where do the monopoly police get the rights to do everything they do? They're just robbing society and stealing and doing whatever they want to do. And the thing that once you expose that, where do we go? Well, the big secret is the world is a self-organizing place. It produces spontaneous order. And once we get government out of the way, I think the economy and society will flourish. This is one more example from the book. So the same 3 organizations, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, and Bilderberg. It's not just the media. So this is a chart. It goes back decades. You're taking a look at the presidents, so I know it's hard to read, but just as an example, so in this column right here, Obama, Bilderberg. Clinton, Bilderberg, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission. Before him, there was George Herbert Walker Bush, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission. Before them, James Earl Carter, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission. Before Carter, Gerald Ford, Bilderberg, Council on Foreign Relations, and a 33-degree Mason. That control goes back decades, and it's presidents, vice presidents, the Federal Reserve System, Council on Economic Advisors, Import-Export Bank, IMF, major universities, major religious leaders, there's you name it, FBI, CIA, DOD, Joint Chiefs of Staff is on this chart. Going back decades, the Republican or Democratic administrations, that's the real quote-unquote government. That's the ruling structure. That's what never changes. Everything else you see is just kind of a television show because it's the media and the government working together. I mentioned Jeffrey Epstein, Bilderberg attendee, member of Council on Foreign Relations, member Trilateral Commission. So exact same, this is the organized crime system. These are the people. This should be the poster boy for the Council on Foreign Relations and Bilderberg. So how are they robbing us? Exorbitant banking profits. They're allowing fractional reserve banking, allowing these banks to create money out of thin air, even though it's inflationary and steals the value out of everybody else's money. Military procurement, unnecessary warfare, homeland security and police state spending, government monopoly privileges. If you're stealing trillions of dollars, what do you call the couple $100 billion you spend to control the media? It's the marketing budget. It's just the marketing budget. It's just a television show. And they're stealing so much that the money that it takes for them to control the media, it might as well be free. The couple $100 billion a year, because it's all, they've already bought it over this, over the year. Every time something pops up like a YouTube, they'll just stack money on the table until the company sells out. They bought YouTube for $1.6 billion when it had less than 100 employees and a handful of servers, because it was getting to eyeballs that they don't control. And that's the name of the game, control of perception. So the money that they spend to control the media, it might as well be free. I like to call it mice nuts. So what am I doing about it? I'm trying to expose it. I'm from a principled voluntarist perspective that government is illegitimate. So there's no real voluntarist think tanks in DC. There's nobody saying, hey, from the outset, government is illegitimate. If I don't have the ability to make up rules for you or steal your money, that I can't delegate a right I don't have myself to a representative or to a government. So if the rights didn't come from we the people, where do they come from? It's just BS. It's some stuff they taught us. They forced us to go to the mandatory government school, and they taught us it was legitimate that they get to rule us. And we want to push back from a principled voluntary perspective, and we want to target the media manipulation, the organizations that are controlling the media, controlling the narrative. And so the book and the flash drive are part of that. How do you bring it to people in a very visually compelling way? And so that's why I use the visualizations that I did. I can take one more, I think, probably. Anybody else?
Over here.
Yep.
So you seem to have done a lot of work in the activism space, and I'm really glad that you're starting a think tank. But I'm curious, what keeps you so hopeful about being able to enact change in the U.S.? I myself come from a public policy background, and I've been, keeping up the fight on that end. But I honestly don't see a likelihood of any drastic change, at least in the U.S. So I was curious, why do you keep doing what you're doing, and what keeps up your spirits?
So everybody that saw the media panel yesterday, the reason that they're censoring us is because we're winning. They wouldn't be openly censoring us if we weren't winning. We're slowly and surely winning the battle of ideas. You don't have to win everybody. You really only have to win the meritocracy, the 5-10% of people that actually do things and create culture, and we're winning that battle right now. The Department of Defense is now censoring memes, and they're worried about mimetic warfare. My book is chock full of memes because the left and the right can't meme like we can meme. They're getting their ass kicked in the war of ideas. And so then the final thing that I'm doing is something. So I've recently moved to New Hampshire as part of something called the Free State Project. The Free State Project is a way of bringing voluntarist libertarians together, concentrating our efforts in one state. It was formed over a decade ago, and the idea was once the total membership of the group hit 20,000, everybody in the group would move to New Hampshire and would exert the fullest extent possible their efforts for liberty. They voted on a state. New Hampshire won in 2003. People began moving immediately, and right now there's over 5,000 people on the ground in New Hampshire, and they've been there for over a decade, and they've had an amazing amount of success. They have rolled back laws. They have gotten libertarians elected to the state house. They're elected over 45 libertarians to the state house in New Hampshire. They've got 25 that are serving there right now. And so they had 1,300 people sign last year, even though they knew it wasn't something that was going to happen in the future, that they now have to move within 5 years. So it is accelerating, and every single week more people land in New Hampshire. And so what my thesis is I have something that I call the Pre-State Project. And a pre-stater in New Hampshire is somebody that already lives in New Hampshire. And so, but supports the goals of the Free State Project. And so I think it might be easier to create pre-staters by exposing the illegitimacy of government and the criminality of government and how the media is censoring people than it is to get somebody to move to New Hampshire. So what my goal is to drop ultimately 100,000 copies of the book, the flash drive, and a DVD of Vaxxed in New Hampshire, supportive of the Free State Project, but as an independent effort so that they can keep their political thing, drive people to town hall meetings, and we just tell them and explain them what's happening. And then, by the way, not only is this what's going on, but look at all of your friends and neighbors that already know about it. And look, everybody's cool. Everybody's socks match. Here's all the evidence. Here's 8 gig evidence. We'll answer any questions that you have. And I think that we can achieve something called the 100th monkey effect, which is kind of the idea that once enough people in a kind of given geographic area kind of have the same understanding that the government is illegitimate or the government's criminal or whatever, that everybody just kind of goes, oh yeah, everybody knows the government's criminal, which, by the way, I've yet to have anybody go, no, the government, other than my 11-year-old, I haven't anybody go, no, it's not, this is not organized crime. And so everybody seems to get it intrinsically, and so now we can back it up with the evidence. But that's why I'm so optimistic, is whether it's the Liberator, whether it's the fact that we're broadcasting all the contents of the Liberator on the pirate box right now, and we're going to put 10 of those in New Hampshire schools to get around the algorithmic censorship of Google and the mainstream media. We are going to get around it. There's a technology revolution. There's no way that they're going to stop the signal. They may, there's absolutely no way we're going to stop the signal. So that's why I'm optimistic. I got time for one more, and then they're going to hook me. Go for it.
I believe Boetie has a documentary a little back, something about 5G and Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So 5G and Wi-Fi. I was just talking to Nate Henderson from Eat Sleep Crypto, and he pointed out that 5G is coming to Philadelphia, and they're going to have the kickoff at the Masonic Temple. What? I ain't saying it's the Masons, but it's the Masons. Anyway, that's it. That's my last question. I'll be over there if you want to get a book. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. Appreciate it. Thank you.